I can't believe I was sitting on my couch. I'm watching the red carpet. Wilson is there. Ian Alexander, Wilson Cruz, Blue Del Barrio, and they're being interviewed by someone who didn't really know a lot about Star Trek. Let's be honest. And you are there and you say, well, I was with my girlfriend. I almost fell off the couch because maybe my readers don't remember this, but I did reach out to you when Mary Wiseman told me she identified as queer, and I wanted to get a quote from you. And I asked you, by the way, are you on the LGBT spectrum or whatever? And you said, oh, no, I'm cisgender straight.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was looking back at that a particular exchange, because that was actually a definitely, I would say, you know, this has been a long time coming in a lot of ways, but even in the way I answered you, it was like I didn't use that terminology. Like, you know, I've never called myself straight, really, and it's always been this kind of foreign, unexplored territory for me, and I'm a very driven woman in many ways. And for whatever reason, I feel, it has not been at the forefront of what I wanted to work on. Or
you said you were an ally. That was the way you described yourself.
Yeah, always happy to like support the community, which is obviously very true. And I think, the more I reflect on it, obviously this is definitely part of pandemic reflection. One of the strange blessings of this time is, I think we all had to take a pause. And I think what I was trying to say at the top of this was romance has never been in the top 5 priorities for me.
Wow.
I'm a romantic in many ways, and like Pushing Daisies is one of my favorite shows, which is, and but then I would always joke, but they can't touch, like there's so many of the romances that I would romanticize had some sort of unexplained tension. And I think, so for me, it's I think it just took this moment for me to drop into it. And I think too, I had not quite met the person that vibrated with me on that same level. And I'm sure we talk about more, because I think there's a larger thing here also beyond the fact that for me, it definitely was a queer experience. But I also have always been someone, I feel that I would probably identify on the demisexual realm, because the feeling, the relationship, the intellectual sort of deeper connection is always what's made me feel drawn to anyone. And I'm I have a lot of really wonderful friends, and always felt very satisfied being surrounded by like a bunch of wonderful people, and having a romantic component, a sexual component, was just never like the thing I needed in it. I got such an adrenaline rush off of just being around people that were fantastic and talented and smart, and made me laugh. And so that, in conjunction with, I think, just, I was very academically driven. And then, I was at Juilliard and the conservatory. Like, I just created situations where I didn't have to work on that part of myself, or explore that part of myself. And obviously it would come up. And I think I reflect back to my girlfriend, and I talk a lot about evidence and like looking back. And of course I was caught up with a lot of women in my life, but didn't quite define it that way. I think there's a lot to unpack overall, the feminism of it all, of the way in which women are told, like, well, women are just that way, or like we just, and I think too, because, and it's interesting because you can't talk about this without talking about sex and sex drive and all that sort of stuff in a certain way. And I think because that wasn't a component, it was easy for me to write off the attractions that I had, because it wasn't our societal norm of like, well, you just want to like grab them and kiss them and do all this stuff to them. And I wasn't feeling that about anybody. I was enamored with people, and there were people that made me lose my breath and all this sort of stuff. But because that component wasn't as tied, I think that was part of why it took me longer to really define it for myself.
I don't think there's a time on how long it's supposed to take. Just like grief, I think love is however long it takes, and you know when you know.
Yes, yes, you
So,
definitely do.
so when did you know? How? Come on, spill the tea a little bit about her without making it into, we don't want to take away your privacy, but we just like to know a little bit more.
Yeah, well, it's been a very interesting year of reflection, and I do in many ways thank this time of pause for what brought me and Maddie together, because we were unpacking our queerness together. We have been on parallel journeys, not the same journey, but very parallel ones in a lot of ways. We're very driven, we're very hardworking, we're empathetic, we like to take care of other people, we have a lot of strong passions, and I think, and I did obviously run some things by Maddie to make sure that she's comfortable with me speaking to this. But
Thank you for that.
yes, partnership. But that we were actually visiting with a friend of mine, one of my best friends from high school, Remy, who had always said to me, she's like, there's gonna be this person who is as crazy about you as you are crazy about them. And I was like, I believe you. And I just, for a long time too, was open to the possibility. I wasn't like, I don't believe in love. I was just like, it hasn't manifested yet, but I'm open to the possibility. But we got to see her very briefly when I was at the New Jersey convention.
Oh, yes.
Recently, and got to just touch base, and they got to meet in person for the first time. They'd met on Zoom a few times, and now I'm so that part really does move me, because Remy's always just really believed that, and it was such a moving moment to be able to be like, yeah.
When worlds collide, right?
Yeah. Oh, but as we were talking, walking on the High Line, catching up, she asked, do you feel that the pandemic contributed to you two really connecting? And we were like, yeah, because part of our journey too was that we were best friends. We were unpacking this together and dated other women as we were starting to be emboldened to embrace our queerness more. And then suddenly it was this moment. We were both single, and there were, there's a lot of cute little stories that I'm sure throughout time I will tell, where I think the filter, because we were exploring too, like how with queerness, we do put filters on ourselves. Like there's heteronormativity is a powerful drug. And
it pervades everything, and it almost makes us reframe our queerness, which I don't like.
Yes, I just completely agree, and I think again it was a time of really reflect. I've always been a headstrong feminist, as you know, when you interviewed me, however many years ago, and obviously in support of that. And I'll speak more too about like the moment of coming out too in relation to Star Trek in a bit, as I get my hair out of my mouth. There we go. Okay. Don't have to cut that. That's genuine married Chieffo. But just there were moments, the filters that we put on, like realizing how, I really, and Maddie and I both have talked about this, like we love men. It does not mean that we don't think men are great. Most of my best friends are men, and and there's a certain camaraderie I have there. And I think because of heteronormativity and our just general patriarchal society, we're often like, and we kind of also enforce that romance is hard, and that that things aren't supposed to be easy, and that the tension,
it's messy.
and you have to get used to it, and like nobody likes doing that with men, or these sorts of things. And it's like, I'm not saying that that's not true for some straight women, but I think we both have had this moment of like, oh no, this was like a much larger level of us not liking certain things. Like, oh no. And
it's different. I'll tell you that it's different, and it's good that it's different.
Yeah.
Wilson said he knew, but he didn't know you were going to spill the beans right then and there.
Yes.
Were there people who found out afterwards, like me? When I came out as transgender, I actually had some friends who got angry with me that they weren't in the circle of people I told first before it became the front page of the New York Post. Were there people who came to you and said, hey, you didn't tell me?
I haven't anyone outright been like, hey, you didn't tell me. What's interesting too, and I'll speak to this moment, on the carpet that day, you know, I was pretty much already out like a month
Oh my God,
preceding.
you were decked out.
Yeah, I was yeah, again, I got my rainbow ring and my necklaces and stuff. And this is a fun thing, like, again, unpacking my queerness with Maddie, like we were already, like, we got matching these, like all this stuff before we were dating, because it was like, this is what best friends do. And then there was just this moment where like, oh, and yeah, just that filter thought of like, I had put up an appropriate filter up because it was like, this is my friend and this is my, you know, someone that I can confide in about relationships and all this sort of stuff. And so we did both have to take the risk and go, is the person who I've unpacked all this with the person that I also want to be with? Can confirm, yes. But to that point, we had been in Vegas. I had been doing a lot of rainbow stuff in Vegas. I had, on my panel with Ken, there was obviously a lot going on that panel, but I had mentioned at one point as a queer woman, but again, it was kind of a, what do they call it? Like a rollout or like a soft open or something.
Yes. Yes. I missed that. So I missed that. Apparently all the journalists did too.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely did not, outside of in-person interactions during the convention, there was not a big internet surge. The surge was, and the joke was after that moment, which I knew it was live. I knew that moment was go to the live cam. But what I didn't fully realize, which again, wouldn't have done it differently, and of course it was part of it, was I was kind of just saying stuff and then Wilson came in and it all just became this celebration, which was beautiful, was that of course at the Skirball Center, everyone was watching the live stream, like on these big screens. And so then as you know, I was decked out, got my rainbow boots, all this sort of stuff. And I'm just like, oh, the panels are starting. I want to go sit with my girlfriend. And so they escort me and I'm like walking through and kind of a few people like, hey, wait, you know, like being very like, hey, and I'm like, hey, like, how's it going? And then I sit down next to Maddie and she's like, yeah, that was great. I filmed the whole thing. And I was like, oh, everyone just watched that. Okay. And then she goes, your phone is exploding. Like she just like hands over my phone. And I was like, okay, that's great. And again, because it wasn't something that was like pulled out of me. I came to that carpet to be openly myself. It wasn't about, this is my big announcement. And it was interesting because earlier this year, every Pride Month for the past few, like, again, this has been percolating. I mean, this has been true my whole life. Just, it coming out is, something that, at the right moment, when the brain syncs up with the heart, I would say, when you're able to unpack all these societal norms and finally just be like, oh, this is my authentic self. And of course, within that, there's still so much more growth. And I'm still now in my first genuine relationship ever. And that's going to be a whole adventure. And so far, an amazing one, better than I could have ever imagined.
I'm so happy for you and Maddie.
Yeah,
she's a lucky lady. Tell me, did it ever occur to you as you were contemplating this that it might hurt your acting career as a former child actor? There are a lot of things that you have to think about as far as repercussions.
Yeah, I feel very lucky and it is very moving and I'm sure I'm going to cry. Yep. And that was part of the beauty of being with Wilson and then being with Anthony during the Vegas convention. I'd seen them speak their truth over and over again on so many panels. And of course, my joke is that I, at the time, didn't feel like, as we're having the first openly gay couple on Trek, I'd be like, I'm thinking I like women. I don't know for sure yet, but, I was like, that's not the time for me to talk. I'll talk about Klingon stuff on that panel, that's not the way to do it. But of course, like wanting to be, and I was in GSA in high school, extremely accepting family. The first gay wedding I ever went to, Wilson was there. I think I might have mentioned that on the live stream.
Yes.
But yeah, Todd Holland and Scott Ellis Loring, who are still married and have, I think the triplets now are like 12 or something. They're older than I was at the wedding, which is like, but Wilson and I were there together. Little did we know. But again, I've been surrounded by so many incredible queer role models my entire life. And so there's always been a clear love and acceptance. So, but at the same time, I think it's important to note that, what Wilson did, and again, I'm going to cry, but like watching him, like his section on Visible, and like, I was just a total mess. And
He's so eloquent, and
So
nobody
well.
scripted that. Nobody had to write that for him. That's
No,
all Wilson. And oh, he's
he's
just
just
such an incredible person. I met him
yeah.
on another red carpet in 2015. I was a newbie trans girl, and he made me feel as if I was the most important person on that reporter
Mhm.
line. Just the way he looks into your eyes and talks
Yeah.
sincerely. And he did that
Yeah.
on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm just humbled that I've been in the presence of so much incredible queer representation and just human beings. And I think, yeah, again, in my heart, it was, I knew there was a moment and I didn't quite know, but it was definitely, it was really peaking, throughout this year. But even, prior few June's Pride Month, it was like wanting to post but not knowing how to articulate it, not knowing also, what am I to speak to at this moment? What, how much can I be an ally? And I think again in my response to you, when you very, very obviously politely and clearly asked me, it was a moment where weirdly enough, within that week, I'd had like 3 other people ask me. So again, the
The
universe
radar was going out, right?
universe was like really saying, Mary, your time is coming soon. And I accepted that. And I'm really glad that I can tell you that Zoom face to face.
Thank you. No, thank you. I'm blessed that you were able to even answer, because I mean, honestly, my job is to ask questions. I don't always expect a response, but you've always been responsive. And this was to be able to celebrate Mary's queerness,
Yes.
which, I mean, I don't think people understand. You can be in a relationship with a man and be a woman and still be queer.
Absolutely.
Hello.
And I want to say recognize for sure, Mary was a huge influence and both in school, like when we were in school together and on the
Back at
show, and
Juilliard. Yeah.
back at Juilliard, and being able to, yeah, when I first met her, she was in a relationship with a woman like that, and it was just part of, how I knew she existed. So that too, and like, what is it to come out and how is it to come out? But there were certainly conversations that we were starting to have, that it was just opening up my world so much more. And but this past June, I was really feeling like, oh God, I know I'm not straight. I know for sure I don't just like men. Like that is definite. But what was interesting, I'm very intellectual. I do my research. I looked up all the terms. And at the time, I was feeling very much panromantic demisexual, felt like a bunch of syllables that seemed to sync up with how I felt. But now the joke is, Maddie and I have this joke when people ask me my sexual orientation, I say it's Maddie Goff. And I think that tracks with panromantic. And
Sure.
it's a funny question, and I'm asking it to myself. You haven't even asked it, but like when people ask you to define exactly what it is, now being in this relationship and feeling so in sync with myself, and I'm like, I don't like, the larger question doesn't even seem to make sense anymore, because I'm like, I'm thinking about this one person and I can't imagine my life without her. And so whether you want to call me pan or bi or lesbian or whatever it is, however you want to define me being in a committed relationship with a woman, go for it. Like that's very much how I feel, because I'm an actor, and that's, I think, part of it all too, is like, I know how to have chemistry and energy with people, and I can create that. But this is the first circumstance fully where I'm so dropped in that it's not, it's effortless in this surreal way that, I mean, I literally have been in this very like place, and like my mom was like, you're a whole different person. You're like, she's like, you've been an adult for a long time and very mature and all these things, but now you're like an adult, which is very lovely and sweet.
Mom's happy for you, I hope.
Oh, very happy. Yeah, my parents are
Good.
thrilled, and they knew Maddie before, and we've known each other since 2018, collaborated, again, have a very similar work ethic, like really came together with our love of the craft, and then things just kept percolating. Was one of the first people that I started hanging out with once we could, once we were vaccinated and all that sort of stuff, and it just crept up on both of us until we couldn't run away from it.
Can I ask, is Maddie in the biz, by the way?
Yes, she's an incredible improviser. That's how I met. Actually, there is a full Star Trek tie-in, which is that Eliza Pearl, who I'm sure you've interacted with, awesome in the Trek world and RPG world and all that stuff. She had been at the premiere of season 1 and had done an interview with me in Sonequa at one point for fangirling. And she is part of Ripley Improv, an all-female group, and also was part of TIG, the improvised generation, the next generation inspired long-form genre improv. And we got coffee at one point because, you know, she's got amazing energy, and she was like, if you want to meet up, and I was like, yes, definitely, tell me about what you're up to, what you're into. And she invited me to come see a TIG show, and then they had a Glam in the style of Glow Ripley show that right after that, and of which Maddie was a part. And so that was how I got introduced to improv theater overall, and I did end up taking classes, some of which from Maddie, and yeah, so that trek led me to all of this. And so being in Vegas and being at these conventions now with Maddie is so moving and surreal, because in a lot of ways, as is true with so many things in my life that aren't directly Trek related now, it's like there is this serendipity highway, as I like to call it, that led me to this moment. So outside of Trek being this incredible platform that speaks to inclusivity and, you know, acceptance of all and genuine equality, so that innately makes me feel like it's a platform where I can speak my truth. But it has led me to all of these beautiful things in my life. And so that's, you know, and she's a brilliant writer, performer, just overall awesome human. Obviously I'm a fan. I know I don't need to
Let me write that down. You are a fan.
yeah,
Okay, got it.
yeah. But
well,
yeah,
we're very excited for both of you, and I think that what's always lovely is to find people who are in love. I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of Trek fans who, you know, are lonely, who wish for everything you have. And there are a lot of actors who, you know, they toil and they work hard and they never get that big break. So what's your currently in love advice to all those fans reading this who want to find their own Maddie, who want to find their own big hit? And I know that, you know, the Star Trek family is sort of, you know, you're still a part of it, but it's not currently, but you're still part of the family. So tell me what your advice is for those people out there who find themselves just longing and wishing.
Yes. Before I forget, you asking that question reminded me, because you had asked me about just thinking about my career and coming out. It all, you know, ties together.
Whether it would be an impact on that. Yes.
And I just want to give a huge shout out to my reps, because when I wrote to them, it was nothing but celebration and excitement. And, you know, I vocalized, of course, as I've always believed, representation matters. And now I feel empowered to say, yes, please put me out for queer roles, because I am. And I want that. And I had, outside of, you know, Wilson and Anthony, for me on Jane the Virgin, when Petra came out, that was huge, because I that's one of the few current shows that I've watched start to finish. I'm obsessed. Jenny Erman's amazing. Like, love that show. I mean, it's so, I told you I love Pushing Daisies. Obviously I love saturated color, heightened genre, all that stuff. But that was huge, because I felt myself loving that relationship so much and thinking it looked hot. And like, I was like, oh, you know, and it allowed me. And then of course, being able to talk to other friends who are queer. And I realized I have again, wealth of queer friends, many of whom are gay men. And I realized, oh, I haven't been able to talk about women being hot with those queer friends, because why would I, you know, like, and
it would seem weird, like, why is she talking about
I mean, it's like it's just like, we're not going to go into it. And the more, you know, I have some really wonderful bisexual friends who were very open to the conversation, and of course been very supportive, and, you know, everyone's just been thrilled. And those that didn't get the, you know, call or FaceTime or text were certainly, you know, understood with everything going on. Just
glad to hear that.
Continued celebration with posts and everything like that. So again, everything's been great.
Thank you for answering those questions. And the question I asked you was advice, because there are people who just wish for love and wish for success, and they see you, and, you know, some people can't handle seeing other people succeed. Other people just want to know, how'd you do it? How do you feel?
Well, I'm really glad that this question came up, because I've been thinking about that a lot. And again, I was kind of saying this earlier, but for me, it was a very queer experience finding love with a woman. But beyond that, my sensibility, like I said, being more on a demisexual realm, I tried the dating thing with men and women, and it doesn't work for me. And that's okay. Trying to meet someone and like have conversation and have this already like thing going, like it doesn't work for my brain. I'm too much of an actor. I'm too much wanting to please. And, you know, who's to say? As it turned out, this was, you know, the beauty of this revelation was that I was living my childhood dream, which was to fall in love with my best friend. And I was like, that's so difficult because like, you can't do it if you're aware of the fact that you want it to happen, and, you know, all this sort, you know, and it still happened, but it was like, that was organically my sensibility. And I really think that, you know, queer and straight dating is very difficult. And I think it's important to acknowledge that like, coming out is one thing. And exactly, I luckily am able to come out in a moment where I'm feeling so deeply in love. But it's just, relationships are hard, and that's okay. And like, it's okay to make mistakes. And I was so afraid of making mistakes that I didn't put myself out there until very recently in any dating situation. And there's a part of me that wishes I had been, you know, taken more time and been more adventurous in the past. But then I also acknowledge that that was my journey, and that I was married to my career, and I still am married to my career in many ways. You know, I'm very committed, and I'm glad that it made me work really hard on my academics. And I was fully committed in the conservatory and got to work on, you know, Macbeth and Iago, and, you know, have
The Scottish
created so
play,
many.
yes.
Yeah. I know. It does seem, I don't have my red curtains anymore. It would really have felt like I was doing it on stage.
Well,
But
what is going on in your career since you mentioned it? Let's just talk a little bit about that. There's an album, and what else is happening?
there is one thing that I can't talk about yet, but I can talk about the fact that I had really posited to the universe earlier this year. I love producing. I love bringing people together. And I've been doing that a lot. This is something I can talk about, Bespoke Plays, this awesome group that I did over 60 readings with privately. Ooh. Just within the group. They're a bi-coastal company, LA and New York. Ellie Pyle and Christine Boylan, brilliant writers and performers in their own right, co-founded it about 3 or 4 years ago, and had been doing in-person 29-hour workshop readings of new plays. Remember Plays is their, you know, catchphrase or whatever, a good one. And I had done a reading of Christine's play Analog, which is a really awesome like inverse of the Born Sexy Yesterday trope. So I'm the engineer and I have my sex robot, and it's all sorts of fun. She's an incredible writer. I've always been that kind of producer mind, and my mom is that way too. She spent her 20s producing in Hollywood, you know, and then moved further, you know, when she was 33, that's when she was like, I'm going to overtly pursue acting, and worked out pretty well. But that sort of getting people excited and energized and being like, oh, this person would be great for this part. I love doing that. But what I had to reflect on was I needed to make sure I was slicing enough bread for myself. And there was a point where I literally like got myself sick. Like I got a kidney infection because I had, you know, the spoons metaphor. I had no more spoons.
You ran out of spoons, exactly.
I ran out of spoons, no more spoons. And but through that moment of reflection, I kind of said, all right, if I am producing, I want to make sure I'm putting myself at the forefront as a performer, because at the end of the day, that's what I want to be doing. That's my first love. But I can speak to the fact that having a project that I'm consistently working on that is my truth and you know, it's fictional, but it is something that I'm able to infuse my full self into and feel like I'm making a statement about being a woman in this modern world, has been really, really fantastic. And that's what I want to be doing. Like, you know, whatever scale it is, I know that eventually, too, my friend Remy, who came up before, had asked me last year. I was directing her in a for the Frigid Festival in a play, and she said in 10 years, like, what do you want? Where do you see yourself? And my first thought was like, I want to be running a production company that is empowering voices that aren't heard enough. And this goes to a term I started using. I can't remember where I heard it originally, but the idea that it's not a minority, it's a minoritized group. You know, it's those of us who in, you know, whatever degree, and again, I think the more we compare each other's you know, trials and tribulations, the more we pull ourselves down. So everyone has a different, unique, challenging experience being a unique individual who is not, does not subscribe to the norm in one form or the other. And so that's, you know, where I would love to see myself in 10 years, and maybe sooner, but
maybe before 10 years, right?
Yeah, but certainly building to that. And I feel like I'm building a community around me, you know, of friends and allies and collaborators who believe in that as well. And so this project is one of those where I'm like, oh, I'm meeting collaborators for life. I'm meeting people that I know I can come back with another idea and be like, hey, what if we did this? Or, you know, and it spans across, you know, all mediums, whether it be film or
streaming,
stage, you know, anything. There's just so much possibility, and I feel really lucky to live in this time where not only can I be an openly queer woman, but I can also be empowered to create my own content. It's not a vanity project, you know, it's a project that is speaking my truth, and by speaking my own truth, I hope others can be empowered to speak theirs. And no two truths are exactly alike.
Very true.
And that's what's fantastic, is like, I'm trying to be the role model I wanted to see growing up. And I got, you know, nice flavors from a lot of different archetypes out there, you know, but it feels like I'm dropping more and more into myself and really being that role model I wish I could have seen as a kid. Because again, representation matters so much. I'm sure if I had seen more instances like Petra on Jane the Virgin, I would have maybe pursued dating a little bit more. Again, I think my journey is exactly the one I was supposed to have. And to come out in this moment, the fact that Star Trek Day happened to be during this time, you know, like I did not plan any of that.
Everything all exactly aligned. Tell me about the music.
Oh, the Klingon.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That was so, like, what a great email to get. Like, hey, like, would Mary be interested in like doing like a rock Klingon song? And I was like, yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm so, you know, I speak so highly of the Star Trek Online people, and Al Rivera, who is just the kindest, like most considerate, always checking in, making sure that I am taken care of. And, you know, the team working with them when I did the recordings for the actual voiceover for the 2 parts of the Big Laurel chapter on the game. Just wonderful. So this was just like a fun cherry on top, that to kind of celebrate all of that. I got to create this with Jason Miller, who had done the original English version, and that was very, like, the lyrics are fantastic. I think they're there in sync, like in the music video or something, but they're so epically Klingon, and like both universally Klingon and also totally apply to Laurel's situation, being a woman in a patriarchal society. And yeah, we worked on it, and I Klingon Language Institute did the translation, and I cross-referenced with Robin Stewart, who's also part of the Klingon Language Institute, because we had worked together during Discovery. So it was great to reconnect with her, and just, there were a few little syllable finesses we had to do. But yeah, I mean, like, I love getting my hands in there, and that was part of the huge gift of getting to play Laurel in the first place, was I got to apply so much of my training and so much what I loved about it. Like I love voice and speech, I love dialects, I love movement. Like, it was so many of the things that I had come to know were my strengths. Challenging, but my strength.
Very much,
like,
so. I mean, that's episode 1. It starts with Klingon dialogue, and people at home are like, these are people are Klingons, and what are they saying, and what's with the words on the screen?
Yeah, I know. It just hit the ground running.
You're one of the few actors who've played Klingons, and the only woman actor playing a Klingon who's played a Klingon who's had 2 different looks. You had the shaved head one, and you had Laurel goes to the salon.
Yeah.
So which one's your favorite, and what was that like?
Yeah, I would even say I think when we got to Laurel with the hair, that was more Laurel like 4.0 or 3.0 at least, because I had the first look in those first few episodes. Then I had the gaunt look in the fourth episode because we hadn't been eating. This is all my, and then I got the scar. So then we had that whole molded look. And then, yeah, so I guess that was Rel.
Yeah, 4, yeah, sure.
Rel 4.0.
Sure.
And I love them all for different reasons. I love the way Laurel looks in that fourth episode in Butcher's Knife, Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, just because I think Tunde directed it so beautifully and lit it so well. And that whole dilithium processor scene like is so sexy and sweet and like, what? These are Klingons. And so that episode just has a very like special place in my heart. So, and I feel like you get a lot of her vulnerability in there, but I think all the jail cell with the scar, like it's lit. Also, again, I'm obsessed with the lighting. When the light hits the prosthetics the way it's supposed to, it's just like, whoa,
magic, right? And also you got to be a torturer, and you also get to be a mother.
Yes.
Something that we have not seen a woman Klingon do. I mean, we've seen women Klingon plot, but we've not seen one torture a human. We've never seen a Klingon mom before.
Yeah, yeah, that's true, isn't it?
You broke ground. I mean,
yeah,
you broke the mold. So you've set a path forward. Do you hope that either Lower Decks or Strange New Worlds or somebody or Section 31 finds a new reason to bring back Laurel? I assume you'll be available, right?
Yes, always. And I think it's one of those where it's like, if anyone knows me, they're like, yeah, we could call her whenever. But yeah, I mean, of course, like bringing her back for Star Trek Online was already such a treat. Like I was like, oh yeah, I love this character. And I think there is so much more to pine in her backstory and her story, like, is it about her chancellorship? Again, just as a storyteller.
Or maybe another character, there's been lots of actors who have played more than one character.
I mean, I would love that. And particularly now, like it would be super cool to come in as a queer character, and get to own that part of myself that I hadn't fully owned yet. Like Laurel coming out of the shadows was already a huge parallel to my journey in just owning whatever level of power. But now reflecting back, I'm like, oh my God, I'm really coming out of the shadows now. And being the leader that I want to be in speaking my truth even further. And yeah, to have the opportunity that, Anthony and Wilson and now Blue and Ian have to speak their truth in relation to their characters and to be, synced up in that way. I mean, that someone had asked me on the Trek Day carpet, what more do you want out of any of the shows, just even as a viewer? And of course I said, yes, I think we can continue to expand our queer representation because IDIC is true across the board, but there are so many different ways to express it. And that's the beauty of this time is more people are understanding how much more it is a part of so many people's existence. And it's not a fad, it's that we're able to articulate ourselves better because there's more vocabulary and there's more representation and there's more, there's just more for us to hold hands and listen to each other. And so I hope that all of the shows can champion in that more, and that we just see every not every iteration, because there will be continued iterations that we haven't even imagined yet.
Of course. But my children will probably watch a different Star Trek than we're watching now. I agree. Exactly. Star Trek will live forever. I'm just asking, Alex Kurtzman, I don't have you on speed dial, but I've asked every single person, just one regular trans woman character, please. Yes. Just one. It's time, please.
I was gonna say, I absolutely, we need a trans woman on Trek. I want that, and I can't wait to meet her.
It'll happen.
Whatever show, it'll happen. Because,
so I always ask this question at the end of every interview. Is there anything I didn't ask you, Mary, that you were coming into this interview expecting me to ask, or something you want to make sure my readers know about you and the people who are watching us right now? Anything that I just forgot to ask or you want to make sure we know?
I love that. That's a great way to end it. I think you really did push the buttons of my brain, as I'm sure in however you try and transcribe this, you're gonna be like, woohoo, she's all over the place. But I'm saying things. I'm happy with what I said. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, I did know coming in, I wanted to speak to the fact that, every path is different, and that you come into yourself in whatever time you need, and that heteronormativity affects all of us, as I was saying, like whether you're queer or straight, there's a lot for all of us to unpack about what we expect in partnerships and relationships. And that, it's, I think we have a long way to go in a positive way in how we define romantic and platonic relationships. And I'm really eager to see how we do that as a society, because I think partnership is beautiful, and I'm a very independent person, and so is my girlfriend, and yet the effortlessness and the ease with which we have found each other has made us both go, oh, I see. Before, I was efforting because I thought society needed me to be in this partnership, or I needed to be in this relationship, but that does not help. So that's where I think the patriarchy, heteronormativity, all of these larger societal expectations really harm us, because we have these I can't think of the word.
I think of them as chains or
Yeah.
burdens or obstacles.
Yeah, and I want to say like flag posts. I don't know if that's the right term, but like
Milestones maybe.
yeah, milestones. There we go. That's a better one, of just like expectation. At this age, this should happen, and this, and like everyone wants this kind of, thing, and once, and it's just not true, which is beautiful. Thank goodness we're not all the same. Like, oh, how boring would that be? And I have a friend who's become more and more embracing of the term weird, because for him it was a term that had a very negative connotation as a kid, like,
Sure.
we all have
You're
things.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, I kind of always grew up with enough like shows and things like that like being weird was cool, like be the different one, and still plenty for me to unpack and deal with, with all of this. But that really struck me, and why I really appreciate that we're reclaiming the word queer, because it's this idea of like not succumbing to the norm, and also questioning why we call that the norm, because I don't think it is the norm. I think that humans are innately infinite, and so any defining little box is not going to help anyone. And I want to break that box open, and I hope that the projects I'm working on now, and that I will be, keep breaking that mold, because it's so much more exciting when you break out of the mold, and you shatter the glass ceiling or whatever it may be. There's so many ceilings and boxes and walls that get in our way, and it comes out of fear. I think, so much of the hate we see overall in this world comes from fear. Humans are innately afraid of death, I suppose. And
or being left out, or
being
being
left out.
passed by, or not getting something.
Yeah.
I mean, how many guys have passed you on the highway on the 405 because they have to be first?
Oh yeah. And then you meet them right at the stop sign, and you go, hey, how's it going? Yeah. You're really, really cool there. But yeah, it's true. So, obviously there's a lot of moments of frustration in this industry, both in seeing, things that are still allowed to exist, and there's, plenty of misogyny and plenty of homophobia and transphobia and so much
Everything.
that we are still having to really shed and unpack and confront. I think a huge theme of what was a larger discussion overall, certainly in terms of race, that we cannot say that we're past things if we're not past them. And that's the bittersweet of it all, because it is beautiful. So many more people are coming out, and me, even on those Pride months where I wasn't ready to make my post, seeing so many more posts was like so fulfilling and exciting. And there's so much love out there. And I love, Maddie has the Einstein Banksy that says love is the answer. She has quantum mechanics, and the other one that's like the really big stuff and the really small stuff. She's really into science. But the two things that they basically can't sing out, all the Trek people are like rolling their eyes right now. They're like, Mary, it's the other thing. And Dr. Aaron McDonald, one of my best friends, astrophysicist, is like, Mary, you should have remembered this. but they're juxtaposed because they're technically, as it stands, there's no way that these two things can exist if we define them by our very binary way of thinking. And so then she has the poster of the Banksy saying love is the answer. And I
So
think
right. So true.
while it can feel trite or cheesy, I think ultimately what love means, which I'm just starting to really understand, is it's on a deeper level, that it's not this tension. Like so often I think our media perpetuated, again, being this like thing, or like you just gotta make it happen. And yet it's actually so much more of this grounded dropping into oneself and really seeing and really listening. At least that's how I am now realizing, that's how I define love, is being able to really be present with someone and listen to them and support them and feel supported by them and seen and heard. And so to me, that is, love is the answer, because the more we can have empathy and compassion. I was talking actually with a Nana visitor, and she was saying,
I love her.
Oh, love her. And again, also like Kira and Dax, like, let's be clear, that was also
Yes.
very helpful to me. Terry Farrell would come into the green room and I'd be like, oh yes, everything's great, it's fine, everything. And then like, just like a total mess. And she's the sweetest and so lovely, and likes all my posts. And every time she likes the post, I just die a little bit. And Nana too, like both of them, so embracing. But she was, Nana was speaking to, you know, she's done, you know, so much great spiritual and all sorts of work, and you know, speaks to it so beautifully on her Instagram and everything. But a friend was defining the difference between empathy and compassion. That like compassion is empathy, like actualized, or, you know, taking action with your empathy. Like we can empathize with anyone, but do you take action to like truly help them or be with them? And you know, I think also here, I'm just riffing, but here we go. Compassion to me is, as an empathetic person, something that I have to check myself on, because I could be compassionate and be overly active in trying to help everyone. And I have to learn the balance between self-preservation and empathy or compassion, because if I'm not maintaining my health, my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, there's no way, you know, you put on your mask.
Oxygen mask first, yes.
Yeah. And that's been a lesson I've learned over and over again. And part of why I had this moment of like, if I'm producing stuff, I got to put my mask on first. And overall,
the kidney thing probably taught you a lot about that too, right?
Oh man, that knocked me out. That was like, okay,
wake up.
You need to chill out. And luckily I could, which
thank God. Yeah.
But I also don't want my body to have to tell me that extremely every time.
Right. Somewhere before that, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Klingon warrior finds self and discovers love is the answer, and compassion rules, baby.
Nice. That was all of it. That was all the different things. I
want to make sure I get the spelling right. You used a word for Maddie in your relationship. You said Maddie, and it cut out for a second. So say it again for me. What you called your relationship? You said it was Maddie something.
Oh, Maddie Goff is her last name.
Maddie Goff. Okay.
Yeah. That's So my joke is her name is my sexual orientation.
Got it.
And she says,
Got it.
Which
I want to make sure I got it right. I wasn't sure what you said, and I was like Maddie Goff, and I'm like,
yeah, Maddie Goff, yeah.
I used to say with my late wife, I was a Wendy sexual, because the first question I got asked by my boss is, "Oh, so you're transgender? So you're lesbian, right? Because you're married to a woman." And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. Why are you asking me this? Anyway.
Yeah.
Mary,
I mean, it's I'm sure you want to, but yeah, just
I could talk for hours. I just wanted to make sure you probably have a life to live, you know.
I do. I'm gonna have to hop off, but I think it is interesting, just that unpacking of how we define ourselves. And like, I think it's important for people to find the terms that make them feel the most themselves. And that's another element of the empathy and compassion, is like, I definitely support how anyone feels most themselves. And I think that I certainly at certain points felt overwhelmed by the number of terms I could find. And, you know, and I think that just to acknowledge that to anyone who's trying to seek out their feelings and their thoughts. And if they're hyper intellectual, you know, like me, and overthink it and then aren't in their feelings at all, like, remember that the balance is also just listen to your heart. Take a moment, watch a movie, see who you're drawn to, you know, like take a moment to really reflect on your feelings. The terms will come later, or, you know, it's a, you know, a symbiotic relationship between that. But I think just to anyone who's in this place of wanting to define themselves more, not to feel the pressure to do it all in one swoop or right away, and that might not change, and that ultimately love is the answer, tying it all back in. And yeah, my sexual orientation can be Maddie Goff, and you can be Wendy sexual, and it's, you know, what makes
Daniel Craig made quite an impression on me after I came out. Let me just put it that way. Be still my heart.
Very understandable. Those eyes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mary Chieffo, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, to talk to the fans, to talk to me, and to give us a backstory that you've gone where no woman has gone before.
Thank you.
So live long and prosper.
Yes.
And I wish you all the best. Let's stay in touch.
Okay. Thank you.